Good day, good morning, good afternoon, no matter where you are, folks. Welcome. It's going to be a good one today. Today's topic, I'm going to be fully transparent with you. We were trying to be provocative. Are you using your members as guinea pigs? We actually tossed around, if you just go with something straightforward, probably something a little more relatable is, can you coach soft skills? And we did that in some of our promotion. But the reality is, today's going to be a fun topic where we're going to talk about the importance of soft skills, the consequences if they're not properly taught that you're going to have with your members, and then how many credit unions are dealing with that by actually ditching their traditional role play for AI simulation training. So it's going to be a fun conversation. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be fun. I'm not here I'm just the guy who says we should go to the next slide. The real subject matter expert is the CEO and co-founder of LemonadeLXP. That's Mr. John Finley. John, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm great, Daryl. You?
Now, if you're going to see scene changes behind the, as we talk here, folks, I got to tell you, it's not me doing it. We secretly have a young man named Nathaniel who's producing this show. So my point of view right now is if John and I look bad, it's all Nathaniel's fault. So that's what we're going to go with. So let's have some fun with that. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping, okay? On the front end, today's session is 100% being recorded. So just so you know, the upside to you is that within the next 24 hours, we're going to send this recording to you to the email address you used to sign up for today's event. And then you can watch it again on demand. What I would suggest you may want to do is share it with some of your colleagues and have some conversations about some of the points being made. And feel free just to share clips of it, right? If that's what makes sense to you. So that's kind of great. So that's kind of the on-demand consideration. That's the playback. That's the recording. That's John. That's me. I think you're pretty much fully up to speed now. So with that said, let's kind of give a little sneak peek at what we're going to be talking about today. So there's really 6 sections. The first one we talked about was the hook, which was, again, that provocative statement. Now, John, what was your reaction when we were making this content and you saw, our how we approach this about the word guinea pigs? How did you react to that?
Well, I inherently don't like the term because it feels like you're doing an experiment. But for the purpose of this conversation, I think it fits. The reality is we're trying to have staff that are role ready, who can have conversations with members and who are educated and well-informed enough, not just on the product and services, but also have the soft skills they need to deliver exceptional member experiences. So I think the idea of not practicing on your members, but rather making sure that your staff is ready when they have that first member conversation, I think that's the focus. So I guinea pig made sense.
Fantastic. Then we're actually talking about the actual pain that you might be experiencing. We'll tie it back to a lot of your frontline staff, especially these days are Gen Z. And there's some dynamics associated with that we'll talk about. We'll talk about what the consequences are of those dynamics, and then we're going to give you a solution. And then, if all goes well, I'm going to see if I can convince John to do a little bit of show and tell so you can actually see what that might look like in a real world application. So that's my hook to you to stick around to the solution section. Finally, we'll talk about what is the business case to make any additional changes or investments to your processes today to incorporate some of the lessons we're going to share here today. And we're going to give you some immediate actionable things you can do after today's session. So that's the flow. That's what's going to go through. If you have any questions on that, don't be shy. So let's kind of go to the next slide here, if that's okay with you. And I love this opening LinkedIn stat, all right? LinkedIn cites soft skills as the #1 priority gap in today's workforce. #1. And that's interesting, right? You think about LinkedIn, they've got a massive sample to research on to pull this content and these insights. And we're seeing that. We're absolutely seeing that. One of the challenges with classical training, and John, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on this, but maybe I can set you up, is that we see a lot of the training will focus on the processes or the steps or the compliance requirements. And it tends to focus less so on the interaction dynamics that your staff may have with your members or even with other staff, team members on, in the course of doing their job. And as such, they may not have the skills developed to handle some of those dynamics of the interactions. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. Humans can sometimes be emotional creatures. So, John, have you seen that? Because for those who don't know, I did mention John is one of the co-founders of the company. He's been doing this for a really long time, like really long. He's actually probably 103 years old. He looks really good for his age. What are you seeing, John?
Yeah, so that soft skill stuff is definitely a challenge that isn't always handled by traditional learning systems. So particularly e-learning, traditional LMS don't really have a lot of features baked in for soft skill training. And in a world where younger generations have been increasingly online, interacting through social channels and messaging apps and so on and so forth, in some cases, there's a lack of confidence and a lack of development of those important social skills. And so there's a gap in terms of the social skill development. And then there's a gap in that the existing current sort of learning management systems in the market don't really address that problem. So sometimes you'll do that, live coaching or role play scenarios and so forth. They're kind of the workaround for that. But yeah, we definitely hear that from our customers and from other bankers. Like often we'll hear stuff like, they talking about their kids. Well, they don't even like to call for a pizza. So it's that kind of reluctance on the social interaction side of things that they need help with.
It's so true. I mean, I can share a personal story where I was interacting with an individual the other day, and this is kind of indicative to what John was talking about, where he says he shared that people are really communicating, especially the Gen Z era in social, what have you, or maybe text messages. They know virtual meetings and they know online gaming. So the story I had the other day was I was communicating with somebody on a messaging platform, and they were in the Gen Z bracket, and they came back to me and they gave me grief. You'll love this. They were teasing me, but they were also sharing with me that they found the use of my periods in my sentences aggressive, and they would prefer that I didn't use them. And you can imagine my response to them was, well, I think what I'm using is grammar. So you see that dynamic. So imagine me now as a member interacting with somebody who is feeling threatened by my approach to what I think is a normal interaction. That's an actual thing. And John, you ever have anybody threaten you or complain about your use of periods?
Not use of periods, but one thing that I find interesting, and it's not just Gen Zs, it's millennials, and even to some degree the sort of newer Gen Xs. When I was a kid, you wanted to call someone, you picked up the phone and called them. And I know when I was a kid, so often I'd get their parents. I'd actually have to talk to their parents and say, is Jim home? And have a little chat with the folks, and then finally get to Jim. These were the things you had to do to cope. Nowadays, people don't even like if you call their cell without texting first. It's a very different dynamic. What's acceptable is different. And a lot of what's happening is avoidance of those moments that we had to endure as kids, where I had to talk to Mr. Jones just to get to Jim, So I think that a lot has changed, and technology has changed the way that we communicate. And so there's a lot of gaps that creates because you didn't have that practice of picking up the phone when you were a kid and having to have those conversations. And that's just one example. There's tons of other examples. Ordering a pizza, shopping. Well, people are doing it online, not even talking to someone working in a store. So the less social interaction we have, the more that skill gap is going to exist.
So how does that play into your operation on a daily basis? Well, one of the things we have here is this Forrester stat, which I thought was pretty relevant, which was if you look at the fact that oftentimes, you as an organization, you as a credit union offer perhaps, I'm generalizing, comparable offerings to the competitor credit union down the bank. So why does somebody come to you? Why does somebody stay with you? And often what it comes down to is that they actually like you. They like their interactions. And Forrester here says, 87% of customers who feel valued are more likely to stay. So that's a huge stat and a huge consideration when you're doing this training. All right. So with that said, if we know that's the dynamic we're dealing with, you could argue that things like role playing should be able to work with that. But again, working with some of the dynamics of the Gen Z era, for many of them, they find role playing an entire, shall we call it, a cringe factor. John, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have found the cringe factor in role play. We've all had to do it through our careers. And there's something that isn't genuine about pretending to be someone and someone talking to you and trying to act out a scenario. And part of the challenge there is that both of us know the scenario is fake, but also the emotionality is different. If you want me to be a difficult customer, I have to muster or manufacture that cantankerousness that's going to bleed into the conversation. And the person who's mentoring with me in that coaching step knows that I'm manufacturing it, so it doesn't create the same level of stress that for them, and it doesn't feel real. So I think we've all experienced that in role play.
Now, there's not just the cringe factor element, but there's also just the pure, shall we say, efficiency of role playing, where when you do that, now there's two people tied up. And if one of those people is the boss, that means the boss is no longer able to help anybody else who is in the organization, on the floor, whatever it might be, if they have questions, if they need requirements. And then you have to look at the fact around scaling that. If I want to train my entire organization, my entire team, everybody in the branch, whatever it might be, how do we do that? John, is that something you see happen over and over again? And how have people dealt with that historically, or is that just the fact?
I think it's something that is difficult to scale, especially if you've got a number of different learners that you need to go through that program. It's difficult on the mentor too, because if you've only got one or two people who are going to do these role plays, then that can start eating up a whole bunch of time and create a ton of downtime for that mentor. And it doesn't allow the learner to repeat as often as they want, to do it multiple times to make sure that they've got it. And so that it's just not a scalable way to do it with humans.
So there's another factor that's also at play here. I'm curious what you folks think. And this is probably a good time for me to mention. I'm sorry I didn't do this already. Please comment away in the comments, post any thoughts, any experiences, anything you have. We also have people actually staffing the comments. So if you're asking a question, they'll do their best to give you an answer in real time. So just please do that. I would love to know your experience here and what John and I are talking about now. I'll share a story. One of the things I've done a lot of over the years, both as the person receiving and the person giving, is that role playing training. But this is what I've experienced. I've experienced where I've received some training, some role playing from one individual. And then fast forward a week or two or a month later, I'm getting that role playing done again from another individual. And I get two different perspectives on how I should respond. In other words, the feedback is inconsistent. Some of the feedback, one might be a much more empathetic person. One might be much more by the books person. One person may say to respond this way. One person may respond that way. And so now I'm confused. Which way should I go? John, do you see feedback inconsistency? Have you experienced what I'm talking about?
I'm guilty of providing inconsistent feedback in role plays. Fact is, you might have a role play schedule that catches you in the middle of a busy day, and you're not as open, you're not in the right frame of mind to deliver that, and you're not focused on the sort of outcomes and teachable moments that you want to convey, and you give a different message one day than you do 3 days down the road. We as people have moods and emotions and things that prevent us from being consistent all the time. And I know I have definitely had those inconsistency issues, just me, myself, not even having a separate mentor, just one guy. So you can imagine what happens when you involve multiple people. So yeah, it's clearly a problem.
So now that is one of the reasons why if you haven't already, incorporating AI-based learning and training into your program addresses a lot of those problems. John, I don't know if you've seen the stat, would love your thoughts on it. PwC, they did a report where they said that AI learners, they train actually not just, shall we say, more consistently, but they train 4 times faster than traditional classroom learners. And of course, that goes beyond role playing, that goes AI across the road. What's your experience been, John?
Well, I've got a lot of opinions on this.
Go for it.
First of all, I have having gone to high school and university, college. I don't think the classroom experience is the ideal teaching experience for people. So I'm not surprised to hear that people learning in an AI environment are going to learn faster. First of all, you can ask it whatever questions you have right then and there and get an answer. Whereas an entire class, if the entire class asks 5 questions to the teacher, you're done. That's your whole time. So it allows me to ask questions, get answers much faster. It also takes away the self-consciousness that people have in a public environment where they might not feel comfortable asking questions. When you're just asking AI, you're going to ask whatever's on your mind. You're going to get answers. I also think that the in-person training has scalability limitations as well. I can't just repeat the training. I can't take it multiple times in a short period of time. Like if I wanted to take it every day, and we all know that repetition drives learning, onboarding of knowledge. So I think it's clear that folks who are able to use AI for learning and can ask multiple questions and can take it over and over until they've mastered it are obviously going to learn considerably faster than folks who are taking off the job for a specific time block and put into a classroom.
All right. So John's made a couple of very interesting points I'm going to circle back on, but I do know sometimes people hear the word AI and they bristle and they think about Terminator and all that kind of stuff. Let me use a different analogy. And what I like is the flight simulator analogy. So think about it. For decades, pilots have been using a flight simulator to fundamentally go and practice when their schedule permits emergency scenarios so that they can know how to respond. And if they respond wrong, they can learn from it and do it again until it becomes just automatic. It becomes instinctual so that when it ever happens in real flight, they just go on autopilot, excuse the pun, and they react based on what they learned in their flight simulator. That's not dissimilar to what we're talking about here. It's where your frontline staff are working in their own flight simulator to actually learn. And there's kind of 3 big things that happen here. So, and John talked about this. We talked about how frontline staff can sometimes feel anxious and cringeworthy. And John mentioned that, that they know that this is fake. Well, when you're using a simulator, if you will, or AI, the psychological safety is there. The AI is not judging you if you mess up. They're not giving you angry feedback. They're not yelling at you. That resolves a lot of the anxiety issues or the cringe factor. It's also very objective, right? It's not just somebody's opinion. So like having 2 different trainers, you might have some objective feedback where this is not. This is consistent, which means everybody taking the training is getting the exact same level of empathy and coaching and how to respond. So from your point of view, the member experience is consistent. You can really grow your brand that way. And finally, we talked about having 2 people off the floor. This allows you to scale without, additional staff. So there's a lot of good stuff there. But with that all said, we're doing a lot of talking here, John. It might make more sense if our audience today could see what this looked like. Is that something you can show us?
Yep. Let me share my screen here. Okay. So LemonadeLXP has an AI coaching module baked in. It's called Banker Coach. And what's really cool about it is you can author your own member or customer in a matter of a couple of minutes. So this is what you're looking at here is the authoring tool. And so you can see the description. I've described Elena Vance, who's 42 years old, an overwhelmed bakery owner, who's losing staff and is stressed and fiercely protective of her brand, seeking a reliable partner. So that's the first piece. Then I go in and I can choose a voice from any number of different voices. There's a ton of different voices you can pick. And then I describe who she is. 42 years old. She owns Vance and Vine, a boutique bakery. It's a catering business. And you're a solopreneur who's poured your whole life savings into the shop, and you're in crisis mode because your payroll didn't go through. And so that's the scenario. Then I can define the scoring fundamentals. So this is aligned with how my bank or credit union wants our staff to handle these situations, then how we're going to judge how well they handled it. So in this case, did they listen actively? Did they acknowledge Elena's emotions? Did they take full ownership after she explains her issue? Did they transform the situation at the end of the call? Did they show empathy and control throughout the call? So these are the criteria for evaluation. The next piece is I put in conversational context. So professional background, current challenges, current process. You know what's cool? I can fill all that in with AI. Once I've built the beginning of my persona, AI will do the rest for me. So literally, it'll take me 5-10 minutes max to create this. So that's the authoring tool. And what it creates is this interactive learning module. So I'm going to have a conversation with Elena. Hi, Elena. Thanks for coming in today. How can I help you?
Help me? Help me? Do you have any idea what your bank just did to my business? I manually submitted my payroll on Thursday night, everything perfect, like always. And now my head baker says she can't make rent because your security team flagged my transfer as unverified activity. I'm a small business owner, not some corporate criminal. I've been banking here for 5 years. Who stops a payroll transfer without even calling?
I totally understand, Elena. That's a very stressful situation when you can't get your staff paid. But you know what? I can help you solve this problem right now. I think all it is one toggle within the payroll application. So why don't we walk through that together? We'll fix the problem and get your staff paid right away.
One toggle? Just one toggle? So you're telling me my employees' livelihoods were hanging on some random security switch that nobody bothered to communicate to me. And now you think it's just that simple?
I'm so sorry. That's our mistake. And one thing I'm going to do after this conversation is I'm going to send you a walkthrough of the software that will show you exactly where that toggle is in the odd event that it ever gets toggled back on. But for today, let's focus on getting your staff paid. Let's walk through the transaction right now and we'll get it done and your staff will have their money in the next 20 minutes.
"20 minutes? That's what you're promising. My head baker Sarah has been threatening to quit since Friday, and now you're saying I can resolve this in 20 minutes? Fine. Walk me through exactly what we're doing, and I want to know 2 things. First, why this happened in the first place, and second, what's preventing this from happening again?"
Okay, so I'm going to stop there because we don't need to go through the whole scenario. And now I'm going to show you the output. So when I'm done that conversation, I get an evaluation. So you can see here my strengths. I showed empathy by acknowledging Elena's frustration. I took ownership of the issue. I maintained composure through Elena's emotional outbursts. And I focused on the immediate priority of getting staff paid. My weaknesses. I failed to provide specific technical details when Elena repeatedly asked. I ended the conversation abruptly. I didn't adequately acknowledge the severity of Elena's emotional distress. So there's a bunch of weaknesses, and then I get some recommendations. Here are the things I can do to improve. Always follow through on specific promises and so forth. These are all related to the conditions that I set in my evaluation when I authored the step. The other cool thing is I get a full transcript of the conversation, and these little bits here are what Elena was feeling when I said the things I said to her. So it gives you some predictive analytics on what the customer or member was feeling as I tried to help them. And you can see it also changes my score as I'm moving along. So it gives me really rich feedback on what I did well, what I didn't do well, and how I made the customer or member feel. So going back to the theme of this conversation, instead of practicing on with a mentor who isn't really having these emotions, or worse, practicing on a member or a customer, I actually was able to practice this, and I can take this scenario multiple times. I can play it 10 times if I like, and hone it and get better and better and better. And it's that kind of practice and availability and repetition that's going to make your banker much more ready when they hit the front line. So that's a quick demo.
That is crazy impressive, and it makes it so much more real when you see it, like you've shared it. One of the things I want to draw to people's attention is this stat from Accenture, because it really makes sense. Like, imagine the scenario that John just walked through, and that didn't go well, and that's very realistic that it doesn't go well. I mean, as I listened to John, to me, it felt like he was doing pretty good, but you saw the feedback and how he can do even better to diffuse the situation. And Accenture talks about that, where they say 60% of consumers who switch banks or credit unions did so because of a cold or a negative interaction. So imagine the baker in that scenario not being happy, not liking the fact that this happened. Would they switch banks because of it? And that would be a big account to lose. That's bad. So there's an example of what it means to do the AI role playing, which goes back to the beginning of how we started today's conversation, which was, are you using your members as guinea pigs? Imagine how John might have handled that scenario without having that training and coaching in advance. So when it did happen in the real world, he was much more prepared. That's the big thing. So if you don't want to treat your members as guinea pigs, which is probably what brought you here in the first place, and you want to improve the soft skills and their capabilities with your members, then we need to look at working with those staff to improve their digital fluency. And if you do that, well, there's three big talking points here. One, reduced escalations, right? You're empowering the staff to have the confidence to solve the problems. They feel equipped. And they did it in a safe environment. So no anxiety. That's pretty cool. And they didn't have the cringe factor. Two, faster time to confidence. Faster time to confidence means faster time that they're able to be put in these situations, which means a faster ramp up time, right? So it's not just about knowing the learning you do on processes and steps or compliance or software. It's about knowing just the softer side as well. And finally, compliance protection, right? It ensures that your staff consistently use the correct legal phrasing during any kind of disputes to mitigate any risk. So that's pretty cool. Now, there's a time and a cost associated with all of these kinds of investments. Is it worth their while? Well, if you look at Boston College and Harvard, they'll say to you that they say 250% ROI within 8 months. So that tells you something. So with that all said, where do you go from here? John, do you want to talk about this? I mean, we've got kind of like the concept. I like the Monday morning audit, which kind of says that you can immediately after this session, you can go back on that Monday morning, meeting you're having with the branch level and ask a question like, when was the last time you practiced a difficult conversation? And that's a fantastic question to ask, and then just be quiet and see what they say. But John, maybe you can talk about the customer experience equation.
Well, I think so. The customer member experience is it's so dependent on your frontline staff. Where banks are increasingly and credit unions are increasingly digitizing, so the experience is becoming increasingly digital. But what's happening is we're pushing transactions to digital, but advisory and questions is still happening in branch. And so that how that frontline staff member handles that conversation is going to have a tremendous impact on the customer or member experience. So I actually recently had a situation where I went into my bank, which I never do anymore, but I had to for because I had a restriction put on a visa. And the person that I spoke to didn't know how to solve the problem. And I explained that the transaction that was not approved on the Visa was a very important one to our business. And it's a monthly transaction that recurs. So there's no reason that it should not go through, but it didn't go through. The person was really kind, but they didn't know the product and they didn't know how to explain how it was going to get solved. So I ended up in the branch for about 45 minutes while this guy figured it out. And I thought to myself, boy, there's got to be a better service out there than this. Because there's a credit card situation and we have a million business expenses that go through automatically, I didn't cancel the card right then and there. But if I were a consumer who had, a couple of monthly things that go through automatically and whatever, I probably would have said, this is ridiculous and gone. So it's when I showed you how to author those role play scenarios, you can put anything in there. You can put in, did they display this product knowledge, and be specific of the product knowledge that you want frontline staff to be able to articulate. Imagine trying to do that with a mentor. They have to evaluate whether the staff member, the mentee, articulated the product right. Did they handle the emotional stuff right? There's so much baked in there. But it's so crucial to that member customer experience that they have great product knowledge and great soft skills. And that's very difficult to do, but it can be extremely costly if your staff isn't good at it.
So when you go back to work, one of the things you can talk again with your colleagues and your peers, are we making training and content that addresses that customer experience equation, whether it be role playing or otherwise? Could we do that better? Right? So do your own little assessment of where you stand on that. And finally, have a conversation with your colleagues about, are we legitimately paying a practice tax? In other words, where our frontline staff, our staff are physically learning how to handle these dynamic situations with potential consequences. And maybe we can get some sharing going on about, has anybody seen consequences of that? How did you try to recover it? How do we try to make sure this doesn't happen again? These are real facts that you can do today while you evaluate additional options, whether you have that capability in-house or you want to look at some tools like what John showed you today in the AI side. So overall, that's kind of cool. That's kind of exciting, something you can do. With that, what I do want to do is I want to offer up a couple things. I want to say, first off, thanks for joining us today. So we're almost done. I was hoping to get us in and out of here within 30 minutes. I think we're going to be less than 35 minutes. So I appreciate your time. I value it. I know that your schedules are busy. I also want to encourage you that if you have additional questions for us, there's lots of ways you can send those questions. So you got to follow up with us after this session today, or if you're watching it on demand, you're thinking about it, and you say, I don't know the question. Well, one way you can do it is just by simply sending us an email. Go to hello@LemonadeLXP. John and I both get copied on that. So we'll see it. We shall respond. Another way you can do it is you can actually follow us on socials. I would do we're on all the major channels. One of the things I would suggest you may want to check out our YouTube channel, because we have a lot of content just like this. It's free. Knock yourself out. If you're there, I'll do the classic, like and subscribe, please. But love you to do that. But also check us out on LinkedIn. We share a lot of the similar content on LinkedIn. In fact, you will see clips and sound bites from today's session in the coming days and weeks on LinkedIn as an example. We do that all the time. Finally, if you do want to learn more about what John showed you today, you can go to LemonadeLXP.com and you can just consume to your heart's content and share pages and talk about it. John, any parting thoughts before you wrap things up?
I would just say, I think AI gives us such a tremendous opportunity to level up the learning experience, ultimately level up our staff without having to massively scale your learning department. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity, particularly for banks and credit unions where the customer or member experience is so important and it's so dependent on frontline staff. I think it's exciting that AI gives us the ability to generate content, to generate types of content we've never been able to generate before, so that we can give the kind of experiences that drive customer and member loyalty. So I think it's a cool time to be in the space.
That's awesome. With that said, folks, we're out of here. Nathaniel, you did a great job. Bring us home, my friend.